what running backs do you have at least 10% of? And it can be good ones, bad ones, random bodies off waivers, at least 10%. Because I think that'll speak to the ones, A, you are willing to invest in, B, the ones that you're picking up volume-wise whenever they're available on waivers.
I have 11 of those.
You have 11 running backs with over 10%. Okay, who are they?
Boy. Will Shipley, Rasheen Ali, Blake Corum, Marshawn Lloyd, Frank Gore Jr., Louis Rees-Zamet, Trey Benson, Isaac Correndo, Dylan Lobb, Dylan Johnson, Jarwar Jordan, and that's it. I believe that.
I should have gone higher than 10%.
Oh, wait.
How about
one more? Jonathan Brooks as well.
Okay. I mean, Will Shipley, you probably have to draft in the late third, early fourth, but Rasheen Ali. So basically, you've been taking Rasheen Ali. That has been the guy you've been putting in some fab dollars to get.
Oh, yeah. That's been my waiver guy. He was my first waiver guy, right? Kind of alluded to this earlier, right? You always have, like, right after the draft, there's one guy that you're targeting on your fab. And then a week goes by and there's a new guy. But originally it was Rasheen Ali. And then I got to the point where I went, wait a minute. I have too much Rasheen Ali. I can't keep putting bids on this guy because you know what's going to happen? He's going to be one of my most owned running backs like Pierre Strong. And every time I go look at my roster ship and I see Pierre Strong, I just instinctively want to cut him.
Who do you wish you had more of? Anybody on that lower end that you wish you got more exposure to?
No, you know what? I thought I would have more Trey Benson, and I wouldn't mind another share or two of Jonathan Brooks. And again, we'll get to the wide receivers. There's definitely a couple drafts that I look back on now, and I wish, or at least I could have understood if I would have taken Brooks over Brian Thomas Jr. So that's probably the one. I wish I had a couple more. 5 would be nice. Get him right into that 15% range.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the top ones, I mean, Jalen Wright is RB4. According to Keep Trade Cut, I only have 1 share. Trey Benson is RB2. I only have 2 shares. Jonathan Brooks is RB1 in the class. I have 3 shares. And Blake Corum is RB3 in the class, and I have 4 shares. So those are actually all on the lower end of mine. And obviously, that's for a reason. I typically draft running backs later in higher volume. I have a lot of Braylon Allen, 7 Braylon Allen, just because I know he has a name. He has a name. Whether he's good or not, whether he's the backup or not, I have no clue. But I have a lot of them for that reason. Same with Will Shipley, Ray Davis. Now, I think Will Shipley and Ray Davis, I think we might look back on, if they can stave off the minimal competition they have, I think we can look back on those guys and go, like, I don't know why we weren't higher on clear backup running backs on good offenses on teams that like to run the ball. I mean, those feel like they were mispriced compared to Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum. I know those guys didn't get the same draft capital, but it just feels like, how can we treat the position one way when it comes to veterans, but then when it comes to rookies, we go, Ray Davis had an ADP, Keep Trade Cut, Ray Davis is way down there, RB10, Will Shipley, RB11. Like, those guys are outside the 3rd round on Keep Trade Cut. Now, I know typically drafts, they were going a little higher, like Ray Davis will usually go in the 3rd. But doesn't it feel like those, maybe we were a little too confident that we just knew that Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd and Jalen Wright are great, and then all these other guys aren't? And what if they're all just running backs on a 53 that all of them need some luck to be startable, but none of them are clearly way better than the others? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll say this. The market, or at least the people that comment on YouTube, are strongly anti-Will Shipley, because anytime I've drafted him anywhere, I believe it was our last mock draft, people were very upset that I took him over Marshawn. So the market has definitely got more conviction on Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, etc. Jalen Wright, while we're discussing it, that's another guy I don't have enough of, or Ray Davis. Wish I had a little more. But again, these are guys that, like, honestly, all I want to do is flip them anyway. The community definitely feels like it knows that Marshawn Lloyd is significantly better than Will Shipley, although they're probably in very similar positions. Similar, obviously running back, but I mean similar situations where they're both behind running backs that are going to see a lion's share of the work. And if you look at what Josh Jacobs has actually done throughout his career, he's usually an absolute opportunity share monster. So there's definitely room for disappointment, I think, in Marshawn Lloyd for people. And there's definitely upside for Will Shipley, which is good for me because then I'll be able to move about half of him and turn it into a profit.
People classify him as like he's this small pass-catching running back. He was a workhorse in college. Now he's behind another workhorse, but again, so is Marshawn Lloyd. So I think we're sitting here going like, okay, he needs an injury, but Marshawn Lloyd probably needs, I don't know, an injury. I think we're just very confident, and I say we, the whole Dynasty community, is very confident that they just know what running back is going to expire and the team is going to give the next guy up the starting job. And like with Will Shipley, it's impossible that could ever happen. And it's like, it's probably maybe a better bet to bet on Marshawn Lloyd slightly, just because he had a little better draft capital. But to say they are a round and a half different in a rookie draft, it's the reason that I have a lot of Will Shipley. You have a lot of Will Shipley. Again, you're investing in opportunity chances only. And then if you're going to question some of these, Jalen Wright, RB3 or RB4, he's in a situation, exactly what their situation is trying to do. What do you think Miami's going to do next year, Shane? Probably draft another Jalen Wright. They're probably betting that they're not going to last for 4 years. Now, it's a good offense to be a part of, but what you're drafting into with Jalen Wright. You're drafting into, I hope I get another 90% version of Devon A-Chain.
Yeah, and here's the thing. He's not 90% as good as Devon A-Chain. I mean, Devon A-Chain literally...
You want the standalone opportunity that Devon A-Chain had. That's
the only thing A-Chain to knock on him literally was his size. That was it. That was the only concern. I feel like the Dolphins would want A-Chain to be Raheem Mostert light and Jalen Wright to be A-Chain like ultra light, like skim, like 8 touches, 9 touches a game. And sure, he's going to pop off and break some off because just that speed and the way that the Dolphins scheme their offense, there's definitely going to be some wide open running lanes for him. But there's definitely going to be some weeks where you're like, well, this guy had 6 touches for 16 yards. And I think people are going to be really, really disappointed. Well, I think a lot of people are just assuming that he's going to do what Devin A-Chain did last year, which is just bonkers, because what Devin A-Chain did last year was unprecedented based on fantasy points per touch.
It's just weird how we kind of treat one backfield one way and then one backfield the other. And there's just a lot of inconsistencies. And it comes down to, like I said, when we did our morning drive, it just comes down to bias that people can't let go of. And you and I have bias. There's probably some players that we're not rostering because we just, I'm willing to be wrong on this guy. We have a couple of those. One of those is Isaac Guerrero for a lot of people. They've just decided that, Shane, he's not that good. If you told me the analysis was I don't trust San Francisco drafting these mid-round running backs because they failed almost every time they've tried to do it, okay. But that's not even the narrative I'm hearing there. It's just he's not that good. The film people have watched him, and he's not that good. Some of the same people watched Jalen Wright and said, he's not that good. He's very specific. Just get a hole for him, and he'll run. We couldn't be more out on Guerrero. People go, I don't even want him. Won't even touch him. Is the community way too confident that Kamani Vidal is a sleeper? That he is the small school sleeper running back in this class, and I have to draft him higher than Will Shipley, higher than Ray Davis, higher than Braylon Allen? Like, is it a clear cut? And draft capital says otherwise. Kamani Vidal was a 6th round pick, and we're basically saying I'd rather have him over Ray Davis, Will Shipley, and Braylon Allen, who went in the 4th. What do you think about that? Have we jumped too far on Kamani Vidal, having him at like RB6?
Yeah. He was fun when he was a sleeper. You know what I mean? RB6, he's no longer a sleeper. Now people are putting real weight behind that. So that's partly why I've missed out a lot on him too.
Yes, sir. I'm with you. Just talk to me a little bit about your wide receiver approach this year, because mine was different than probably what I would have thought. But now that I've kind of gone through and thought about it, I don't think it was crazy. So I'll get to why I'm saying that here in a minute when I go through my rostership of the receivers. But just talk about your general feel on this receiver class. Do you have regrets taking some, thinking, man, I was chasing the next big thing at receiver, and now that I have 5 shares of this guy, I kind of wish I could have like a future first instead? Or what are your overall thoughts, and then get into your shares?
I stood, and I know people said this class was super deep, right? So you trade back, get wide receivers wherever you want. They're all going to be really good. I said, no, I'm good. There's a big 4, right? There's Harrison, Neighbors, Roma Dunze, and Brian Thomas Jr., and those are the ones I drafted. Everyone else that I have, we're talking Xavier Legette, I have 2 shares of. Everyone else is 1, just 1, because I don't have a ton of, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't have a ton of conviction on any of those other wide receivers. I've literally no idea which one's going to turn out well and which one's not, because a lot of them have bad profiles. Some of them have really good profiles. Some of them are 24 years old and landed in a good spot. And I'm not smart enough to figure that out. I kept it pretty much just between the top 4. I thought those are the dudes I would be in on. I like some of the other dudes, so I drafted them when they're there. But the reason I have so many of onesies, because I wasn't trading up to get the other guys. I was like, fine, if Keon Coleman's gone, then I'll get Ricky Purcell. Ricky Purcell's gone, sure, I'll get it at a 9 Mitchell. Roman Wilson isn't on the board. Oh, okay. Troy Franklin's fine. I didn't feel a need to target any of those other wide receivers. Whichever one fell to me, cool.
My top 4 would have been a top 3. I don't think there was much separating Brian Thomas from the others, but that point is neither here nor there on where your line was. Some people would have Xavier Worthy and Ladd McConkey included in that big 4, so it would be a big 6. So just some interesting facts about the receiver class. So according to Keep Trade Cut, of the top 32 valued rookies, 18 of them are wide receivers. That just speaks to the absolute obsession with the position. Now, interestingly enough, out of the top 32, 3 of those are in the top 6. So from pick 7 to 32, that's 26 players, right? 15 of those are receivers. You've been playing this long enough. Are 18 receivers in a class ever going to be more valuable than the pick you drafted them with? What are the odds every one of them goes up in value for where you pick?
0%. 100%
that is
0%.
100% that is 0. Got my head around that. So I've done 37 drafts, and I have 84 shares of this year's receivers. So on average, hell, I'm drafting 2.3 receivers per draft pretty much. But I'm looking at the top. Like, I have a ton of Malik Neighbors, 6 Malik Neighbors. I'll take Neighbors. You and I have been on Neighbors at the beginning. Like, he's way more valued even than the community values it. Like, he's wide receiver 6 or 7 in Dynasty. And I can get that with a rookie pick, I'm just doing it. But after that, I mean, I have 4 Marv, I have 3 Adunze, and I actually have very little of the next tier of receivers. 2 Brian Thomas, 2 Xavier Worthy, 2 Ladd McConkey. So just a couple of them, but I really was pretty indifferent in picking. And that makes sense, right? Because I have so much Michael Penix. That's where I was taking Michael Penix. 112, 111. I was not taking those receivers generally. I was taking Michael Penix there. I was largely out on that second tier of receivers. For me, it was like 4 through 9. Thomas, Worthy, McConkey, Keon Coleman, Ricky Pearsall, and the other one I'm missing, Xavier Legette. Like, I was out on those guys because I feel like those are the ones that have the best bets to become those good, maybe threshold receivers. But if they turn into a Jerry Jeudy or someone like that, like, that's a fair projection. If that's what you think they're going to become, Jerry Jeudy is not a bust. He's a bust if you held him for 4 years and you wonder why you don't have a great asset. But there was a window. There was a window you could have flipped Jerry Jeudy for a first. We could go down the line and name a ton of receivers. Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman. You could have moved all of these guys, even after a year, for at least what you paid. You could have re-rolled, but we oftentimes don't have the discipline to do that, so I just didn't draft a lot of them in that range. So what does it take from a threshold standpoint to actually be a receiver that you can flip for a future pick? Future first. Like, can you even flip like Zay Flowers? Those types for even a future first? Yeah. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, you look at Jaden Reed, Rasheed Rice for different reasons. So Jaden Reed,
Zay Flowers, JSN.
Yeah, JSN, Jordan Addison. These are guys. I mean, several of those actually performed. Not JSN, Jordan Addison, Jaden Reed.
If Keon Coleman has Jaden Reed's rookie year, that's probably a success, wouldn't you think?
Very much so.
Why is it any different than years past? Like, what is the play? If you're sitting here listening to this and you have 6 Keon Colemans, what's the play? If you're overexposed, what are you trying to do?
Honestly, I'm trying to flip. If I had 6, if I was overexposed to any of these other mid-tier wide receivers of this class, not in general, just mid-tier of this class, that second, third tier, I'd rather flip them for running back. Like, can I move Keon Coleman can I move him for, I might as well bring it up, Marshawn Lloyd plus? Can I move him for, it would have to be Jalen Wright and a lot plus, but you know what I mean? I don't know that, like I said, we just saw Jordan Addison, Jaden Reed average, around 13 points per game, 12 to 13 points per game, something like that. And you can't move them for a number 1. Generally, you can't. Now, in other people's leagues, if you can, then fine. Hold on to Coleman, knowing that you can flip him for a first later. It's just I haven't seen it in any of the leagues I'm in. So, but if, again, your league economy can be completely different than ours. So just I want people to take that into account. So if Keon Coleman hits 11 points next year per game and you're able to move him for a first, cool. Hold on to him and do it. It's not something that I know that I'll be able to do.
But what people do value is the just grand illusion that they're going to hit on the next stud receiver. That's what you're really chasing. If I told you end up with Jaden Reed or Rasheed Rice or Zay Flowers, you're going to go, okay, at least I didn't whiff on the pick. But you're not excited about it. So, like, I'm looking at these running backs going, man, I kind of feel better about Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White, even James Cook, Ken Walker, like if I can get one of those guys and I'm giving up this receiver that has first round capital, but ultimately if you're telling me they have to hit above a Zay Flowers or a Jordan Addison or a JSN to even be seen as a guy I can reroll, A, it's a product of the running back versus receiver market, but B, it's just that the standard is higher. Yet how many people did you see have to get into this class? They could not trade that 111 before they could draft Lad McConkey. They could not move that pick, even if you're offering them JSN, Jordan Addison. You're going, well,
Yeah.
aren't you kind of hoping they become the same exact thing?
Yes.
Right? Very weird. So where's the future of the receiver position? Meaning, like, how are we going to treat this class going forward? Because this feels like this is the bubble. If a lot of these receivers just end up becoming guys, which a lot of them are, what if the successes out of this class are Javon Baker, Jermaine Burton, Luke McCaffrey, Roman Wilson, and the busts are Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall, Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman? What is that going to do to future wide receiver evaluation where we can just go, man, this is the second straight year where we can just say draft capital doesn't matter at all. They're all the same, but I feel better about getting an 800-yard receiver if I spent the 303 than I did the 201.
I mean, so it kind of feels like we'll start treating them like we do running backs, that level of wide receiver, where it's any wide receiver.
Wild to think,
53.
isn't it?
Yeah, where there's 8 or 9 wide receivers that matter, right? There's 5 running backs that actually matter, 6 running backs maybe. And that's not going to change. The rich are going to stay rich. Like you said, I can't bank on draft capital. So why am I going to spend a first round rookie pick on Sky Moore because he was drafted in the second round when I can just buy someone with a similar profile? Or if even a worse profile, at least I'm just spending a third round pick on him. So if he doesn't hit, I don't care. I don't care if I miss in the third round. I care a little more in the second round. Obviously, I care a lot if I miss in the first round. So I think targets are still going to be consolidated to the elite players. Even if there's 2 wide receivers on a roster, those 2 elite wide receivers are going to get a majority of them. And then you will see the wide receivers that get you 400 to 800 yards that, quite frankly, yeah, you don't want to be spending a first or a second round rookie pick on.
Yeah, I think it, just to tie a bow on the receiver discussion, which I'm sure will continue to be a prominent point that we hit on in future shows, is just this idea. I don't even want to call it the wide receiver dead zone because there's so many of them. It's the opposite of dead. There's a ton of options. But really what people are doing when they're speaking with willing to not make a trade of a first for a Zay Flowers or someone like that, they are really speaking to they're starting to value flexibility, right? I'd rather have a first than a receiver that's parked in this range where I know he's wide receiver 27. Because I can see the numbers. I think enough people have looked at war graphs and understand that like wide receiver 27 isn't making or breaking your team. So it's just like being in the middle with your dynasty team, right? You either want to be at the very bottom of the threshold tier where I can plug in Josh Palmer and he can give me 2 points less per game than JSN at 10% of the cost, or I want to do what I can to get at the top. And a lot of times at the top, it's very expensive. So what you'd rather do is just get a lot of your value out of the middle and at least have the option of future picks, right? Because the easiest way to get a stud, if you can't buy a stud, is, okay, I have the 102 next year. At least that gets you to the table of next year's Jaden Daniels or next year's Malik Neighbors. Even if they don't end up being good, it didn't matter. If you had the 103 this year, you could get to the table to a lot more players than you could if you have the 108. And that's pretty consistent in draft classes in the past. I think we're starting to try and figure that out going forward. So that would be my takeaway is if you have these receivers, maybe not right now, but if you have Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, like don't be scared to trade any of those guys and re-roll for the future first. Especially, I can't hit on this enough, Shane, if you're already flush at receiver and you just went best player available, okay, Lad McConkey was there at the 201, but he's my wide receiver 6. You don't need him. You don't need him. You'd rather re-roll for the flexibility. Take the short-term value and move forward. And if you have any draft regrets, there's always tomorrow. You're going to have a window on a lot of these rookies. The rookie season has just begun, but have the discipline that if you're really questioning why I have 6 shares of Keon Coleman, and there's a window for you to move 2 of them, just at what you paid, not a profit, just, hey, I spent the 201. They're offering me a 26 first. It's a lifeline. Just take it. You know, it's the odds that it absolutely burns you and you look back and go, Shane, I traded all my Jamar Chases for random first back in the day. Like the odds that type of loss happens on any of these receivers outside of the top 2 or 3 is so low. Have the discipline to do it. Don't miss those windows. I'm speaking to myself too. Ooh, that guy looked good. Wait till he gets more opportunity. I'll give you a second. I need a first. Then you don't move them, and then you're stuck with 9 shares of Elijah Moore. That sucks. That's the takeaway. Thank you all for the support through the draft season. Probably going to start focusing more on roster reviews, roster building, roster construction. Mock drafts are over for the most part. We'll do some startup content and whatnot, and then some special stuff coming from Manic and Chill over the summer. So thank you all for tuning in, and Manic and Chill is out.